Welcome to Surkeus Records, the podcast, episode 3, season 2. I'm joined by Fred Cameron, operations director at Solid Outreach here in Victoria. Fred, for those who don't know about Solid Outreach, could you tell them about what you guys do, how you started, and perhaps mention some of the new projects and initiatives you're working on?
All right. So basically Solid Outreach is the drug users union here in Victoria. So we are a drug users group who has moved into harm reduction, which has sped up exponentially as a result of the overdose crisis. So we started out as an activist group. It was a group primarily made up of, middle-aged men who were using intravenous drugs and were tired of being pushed around by the police. So they got together for, strength in numbers and safety. So it started out as out of necessity, as well as being an activist group. So we've been kind of, pushing the narrative and trying to get policy change driven through. As I said, we've really grown a lot as a result of the overdose crisis. So at this point in time, we are made up of approximately, I would say, 70 or 80 staff, 50 full-time employees, and then we work in the housing sites as well, employing some of the residents that are living in shelters across town, our supportive housing units. So we provide harm reduction services. We work in all of the overdose prevention sites in town. Not all of. We work in the Harbor, the Johnson Street PHS facility, as well as the COVID housing at what used to be Paul's Motor Inn, the Howard Johnson over on Gorge, as well as the Mount Ptolemy Hospital. Solid has been for a few years partnered in a cannabis substitution program. So basically that means we give out free cannabis to people who meet specific criteria. So we deal mainly with people who are using hard drugs, or they're on social assistance and they can't afford medicinal cannabis. So basically what the cannabis substitution program offers to people, it was initially targeted to people who were using fentanyl, and it would help to alleviate dope sickness to a degree. But on top of that, it also helps people with appetite stimulation, and it allows people to control when they go to sleep. We need to have patterns in order to work in the system. In a 9 to 5 world, that can be difficult to adapt when someone's using fentanyl or some of the stronger drugs out there. Some of the people I see taking advantage of this program have come an incredibly long way, just improved their lives by leaps and bounds. It's just been a huge asset to our membership.
How did you come to this place in your life?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about your personal story?
Yeah. So personally, I had struggles with addiction from a young age. So, I grew up mainly in Alberta, kind of a different culture out there. Things are a little bit faster with oil money, and everything happens a little bit faster out there. So it's not quite the same here. We hear so much about heroin and fentanyl use, but out there it was mainly stimulants and alcohol. So at the end of probably 25 years of addiction and struggles, I moved into a recovery facility, and I moved out to Victoria. So I pretty much packed my things and moved directly into a place called the Foundation House, which is a supportive recovery facility run by the Umbrella Society. I spent about 2 years living in there, kind of started my life over again. It's a pretty extreme change to, for good or ill. I left my friends, family, enemies, all of my belongings, my business, all, just everything was gone. So it's somewhat traumatic to, even to lose the bad elements of my life. But I moved into this recovery facility, and that led to an opportunity to get involved in a research project, which was designed to identify and help to influence policy around stigma in primary health care. So I worked as a representative of the Umbrella Society, but we partnered with Solid. So I worked on that project for roughly three years, I think, or 3.5 years before moving on to others. But we partnered with Solid, and as a result of the relationships I built in there, I kind of started a new career as a research assistant. I work in collaboration with University of Victoria and some of the other service providers in town. But I got an opportunity to start in a new direction altogether. I had been a tradesman. My primary trade was a cook, but I also worked as a painter, handyman, and a roofer. Before getting an opportunity to start to work where I'm speaking and using my mind and experience to make a career and influence the community.
I'd like to discuss the recent stats released in the BC Coroner's report a couple days ago. 2,224 overdose deaths or deaths by drug toxicity happened in 2021 alone. At yesterday's rally with Moms Stop the Harm, I heard the official stat is over 9,000 overdose deaths since 2016. We're going to play some of that footage from yesterday's rally right now.
The tears from our grief is losing over 9,000 loved ones since 2016 in our province is unbearable, and it cannot be measured. We're here today as a response to our BC Coroner's heartbreaking report. I can share that we have stood on the steps of the Parliament buildings many times before, and it's with a heavy heart that we are here again today. So many of us have maintained our hope over these years, and hope means the promise of a certain thing to happen. Hope is based on an expectation of positive outcomes with respect to circumstances in one's life. To Premier Horgan and Minister of Health, Adrian Dix, we state today that our hope is fading. It's battered and it's bruised. Our voice is now becoming a voice of outrage and anger for the injustice of the deaths of our loved ones, and for those who continue to navigate a broken system of care and who die in that process. Today we state enough is enough. The report card is in, and it's sitting clearly on the desk of our Premier and our Minister of Health. Clearly, the political will and stigma continues to prevent this government from providing a scaled-up, urgent response to this crisis that will end the deaths. So we ask the government today, where is your leadership? Your silence is deafening. I'd like to introduce Shane Calder. He's a harm reduction advocate. He's loved by many in the community of Victoria. And let's give the mic to Shane and get a little excited here and noisy.
Sorry. Okay. I've been asked to keep this PG, so you're going to have to not tempt me. I'm not going to give you anything new to think about. We know people in this number. You have held people in your arms and told them it was going to be okay. And it wasn't. We know, though, that this number could be much, much worse. We know that. This is not the ceiling. This is the middle ground. You stopped death. And don't fool yourself into thinking you didn't. You did. We look around and we think it's not working. We didn't do a thing. We failed. No, that is not true. That is not true, right? I mean, I know it's hard to lay your head with grief. You go home and you think you haven't done enough and that you failed and you could have done more, and this is the thing that drives people insane. It's what causes us to leave the movement. I can't take it anymore. I can't do it, right? But that's not true. It is not the height of the hill. It's not the steepness of the slope. It is the fact that we walk it again and again and again, and it turns our grief and our sadness into anger. Don't hide from your anger. Don't be ashamed of it. You've earned the anger. You have earned your anger. You hold that tight. You hold your families tight. And today, you know, you're going to hold someone else and you're going to tell them it's going to be okay. And it might be for them. This is not your fault. It is their fault. Yes. It is their fault. This government is not scared of the grief of families. It is not concerned with our frustration. This number does not change anything. They're more concerned with an apathetic voter. That's what they care about. They think in 4-year chunks. That's what they do. We need bravery. We need guts. And I think that's possible because you're showing the example right now. You're doing it. What we do is brave. Make no mistake, because you don't have to do it. Honestly, you could get paid more, for fuck's sakes, right? You could kick that family member out and say, I'm done. I'm good. I've had enough of you. But you don't, right? Boundaries are good. I get it. We do it. You have to, because you gotta get through tomorrow. But still, not for a second can you not see that we have had victories. We have. This number, you know it. Way worse. You have succeeded. And I love every one of you. Thank you.
So, Fred, the numbers are rising, and I don't want to downplay the loss of lives by saying numbers. These are people who have parents, family members, friends, but they're people who have died preventable deaths. But why are the numbers rising, in your opinion?
I guess the biggest variable there is poison or toxic drug supply. There's probably more service offered to help people than there was at any point in time in the past with regards to drug use. But at the same time, as hard as we work, the supply seems to be getting less predictable. It's getting stronger, and they're adding different substances to it. We're doing our best to keep up and adapt services to keep up with the times and the drug supply. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we've seen what I would guess, I don't really know definitively, but the supply chain would have been interrupted and drugs came into the city in a different manner. And as a result of that, the potency went up significantly. So I was a member in the development of a drug checking project, and we've watched the numbers in terms of drug potency and the makeup over the past few years. And looking back 2 or 3 years, there was still heroin in the drugs, and it was approximately 4 to 6% heroin and small amount of, probably equal amount of fentanyl mixed in. And at that point, that was strong dope. I remember seeing at one point 10% dope was coming, or 10% fentanyl coming in, and long-time users were saying, let everybody know this is dangerous strength here. But once COVID hit, and first off, the supply was interrupted briefly, but a few weeks into the crisis, we started to see numbers that were way higher. I would guess that could be attributed to new people mixing, cooking, and supplying the streets. But the numbers were going as high as 25%. So that's 2.5 times as strong as what was dangerously high in the opinions of, I guess you can call them the experts, the people that are using the drugs 3 years ago, I guess now. But in addition to going up in strength, it also became less predictable. So it's not always that strong. Sometimes people are buying dope that's 4 or 6%. So that's a significant difference, many times as strong. And if you don't know what you're getting and you're using intravenously, it's essentially Russian roulette. You don't know what it is you're putting in. So there's just not, people don't have the same amount of control that they once had because they don't know what it is they're getting.
So we both heard people shouting for safe supply at the rally yesterday.
So let's say that again. What do we want, people? Safe supply! And when do we want it? Now!
What does that look like to you? Like, how impactful do you think it would be if the government stepped in and made certain narcotics that have been tested for safety available?
Mm-hmm. That's going to take some time to iron out. As is the case with any kind of solution offered to a social problem, the problem is much more complex than just what we see on the surface. So it will have impacts within the community that go much further than the intention. But there's a number of things that come right away. It would allow people to know exactly what it is they're getting. It would allow them to get a routine happening where they're using in a safe way in order to to improve function and simply the ability to live a normal life, I guess. So there are all sorts of different benefits that can come on an individual level, but also it will help to regulate the supply and have some accountability out in the community. A large part of the problem with receiving a toxic supply is coming from basically amateur chemists that are improvising and trying to get a product out to the street, but they're also trying to make money. A lot are trying to support a habit, and there's just a lot of different variables that all add up, add to the toxic supply going out. They'd be getting access to the supply in a safer environment. A lot of the grind and the trauma that goes along with the lifestyle is a result of the way that they're getting the drugs. The criminalization of it, for example. That's what allows certain people to control the market. We're already seeing projects happen on a pilot level where a small group of people from the street community are able to access safe drugs, and we're already starting to see immediate benefits for a lot of the individuals that are part of the program. By removing the grind from their lives and having it provided in a safe manner, it allows people to get back to something resembling normalcy. I know some people that I've watched come in, eating and sleeping patterns are so far off that they have trouble getting any kind of momentum where, you continue to build on the day that you just lived prior. In order to get to a point where people are able to go back to work and have control over their day-to-day life, I think this is just a huge step. So we're starting to see with some of the people that I see on a regular basis, physical health is improving all the time. You can look at them and see in their eye that they're doing better, but the cognition and conversation is improving. Like, there's just so many benefits to it. And this is just on a very short-term observational basis I'm talking. But as we step away from the need to grind it out and get drugs, we're going to stop seeing street level crimes and a lot of the other things that we associate with drug use. The cost on society goes, so far beyond property damage and having the police there. There's psychological damage that goes into the lives of these people, and as we see with other types of trauma, it gets passed on from generation to generation. And combining a safe supply with our initiatives at decriminalization, which as far as I can tell is just on the horizon here, this is a turning point. We're about to see history changed in the province of BC. We'll be the first one in the country to get decriminalization through. And there are similar projects. SAFER is the name of the Safe Supply Initiative I was talking, which is in multiple cities across the country. It started out as a Health Canada exemption, and it's been going for long enough now that we're actually seeing concrete results and improving the lives of the people involved.
A safe supply combined with a safer place to actually take the narcotics would automatically decrease the amount of overdose deaths, just because of the nature of that system, and people aren't having to resort to various ways of getting drugs that are essentially tainted on the street.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of positives there, obviously.
Absolutely.
But I wanted to ask, when it comes to safe supply, I think a lot of people will be interested to hear how that correlates with the rehabilitation process then. Mm-hmm. If someone is getting access to narcotics, and I don't know if it would be free and clear, or if there would be some kind of vetting process, but if they have access to a drug and that they're addicted to, at what point does the rehabilitation process start? Would it be a personal choice then? Would there be a timeline, do you think, added to that registration process, or how would that look?
Well, I think that rehabilitation needs to be redefined. I think I got to a point where it was so shitty that I had no choice but to turn it around or accept my fate. If it wasn't bad, though, if it was still fun, it was really fun to party when I was a teenager, early 20s. If it was still fun, I would never have stopped. So rehabilitation, to me, is totally different. I couldn't handle my booze. That's why I got to where I was. Most of the people I partied with, however, they turned it off on Sunday night and they went back to work on Monday. They went through the week and they did just fine, and they partied just as hard the next week. I couldn't stop. That's two totally different stories with people who are doing the same thing. I was the minority in that group of people partying, but I'm much more visible because, a train wreck is much more noticeable than somebody going to work 9 to 5 and eating dinner 5 nights a week. That's not a story. So we have this narrative about, you use until it's out of control and then you get sober. That's my story. But I also work with, and I have many friends, family, acquaintances, colleagues who continue to use, and they don't, and they live a perfectly fine life. So that was my story that I had to rehabilitate by getting sober. But I see others, though, who, as I had said, by removing the grind, you're also gaining time. So as somebody that couldn't stop, it was a 24-hour-a-day thing for me. I was working in order to support a habit. That was all of my money. 100% of my finances went into it. My time went into it. The amount of energy that one spends being paranoid it's exhausting. You need the drugs in order to keep going. By removing that grind, suddenly my time was mine again. Same thing would happen. You'd hear the same story from somebody that's continuing to use drugs, but in a safe manner, where they don't have to hustle to get it. They're not at risk of violence. They can fall asleep and their stuff will be there when they wake up. Someone can continue to use drugs in that context, and eventually they're going to start to see a better future, and they're going to change the direction. That'll happen organically, I think. I don't think we can make any one path. We're going to find out that we don't really understand as much as we think we do here. But again, I'm seeing so many people started out, and a lot have tried, the Dilaudid, the hydromorph programs. This is successful for some, but there are others that, what it'll do is take the edge off to allow them to get out of bed, and then they can go to work, make a little bit of money. They still have a habit with the fentanyl or heroin, but it took the edge off, but it didn't work. The next level, I think we're starting to find out now that people need fentanyl in order to curb that need. But the ones that are getting access to that, like I said, their time becomes their own. So it's having huge effect on the lives of the individuals, and they're finding a way to define their own rehabilitation. As I got over some of my troubles, and I started to show by example that I wasn't repeating that process anymore, my phone started to ring again, and it was only the people that actually cared and loved me. The ones that were just calling me to bum money or to go out partying on the weekend, they didn't call. But all of the people that I had alienated myself from in my darker days, the best ones came back to me, and the world opened up to me. And I'm starting to see the same thing for people who are still using drugs, but in a different context. One of the things that we see in our organization, by combining all of these different supports, we've got a drug users group that works together largely for peer support, but they also come in looking for employment. They can oftentimes get access to clean drugs, and then they have links to other social supports. To put it into perspective, just how much of an impact it can have to offer all of these social supports, clean supply, having the peer support that goes along with bringing people with a common mindset together. In the past few years with Solid, we have a group that's generally, kind of a revolving door. People come and go, but for the most part, we're family moving forward. We have approximately 70 people, and over the past year and a half or so, we've moved everybody on our team from supportive housing into market rent housing. By doing that, we're getting people away from the grind and the bad element that keeps us wrapped up in it. It's by adding all of these supports together, by having a clean supply, housing, social support, peer support. Here at Solid, our membership has access to all of those things. So when they're ready to take that next step, we've got a net, and we move forward as a group. The majority of the people, when they come to Solid, they start out as a volunteer. We hire people directly from the street community. So these are street entrenched people who have been marginalized by the system. They come in as a volunteer working a 2-hour shift. The majority of them have gone from working a 2-hour volunteer shift to, they're working 5 days a week and moved into market rent housing. On top of that, we haven't seen a single incarceration within our group. Historically, none of these statements have been the case. So this is the actual outcome of adding all these supports and doing it collectively. All of the things that we talk about in text, or we read about in textbooks, what the academics are talking about, we're seeing various levels of success in programs across the community, but within Solid, it's right there in front of me. There's no denying that what we're doing is having a positive impact on the community.
Well, Fred, I want to thank you for the work that you're doing, that Solid Outreach is doing in the community. Thanks for coming by today to have this chat. Before you go, I wanted to ask you about a couple of your own personal creative endeavors. I know you're a writer and a big fan of music. So if you could just talk a little bit about some of the things that you do in your off time to express yourself and get some of this emotion out.
Yeah. I guess as long as I can remember, No, I guess that would have started about 1995. I had somebody come to our social studies class, and he was running based on the platform that there were 200 people going into a journalism class every year, or graduating from a journalism class, and somewhere between 4 and 6 of them would actually get a job. So he came to us saying that we need to raise tuition in order to limit the number of students coming. So to me, basically, that meant that only the rich could get a job as a journalist. I took exception to that, and I decided I was going to become a journalist at that point. So my whole life I've been saying, essentially, I'm a writer who doesn't write. I kind of started out as a cook when I was quite young, just to pay the bills, and my life got sidetracked, and I never actually got back to school, never started writing, until I got into recovery, and I went down. I started at Camosun. I was just taking one course, with the goal of becoming a journalist again. I decided I would get back into it. So I just showed up at Nexus newspaper, and I went to talk to Greg Pratt, who's the editor there, and I just showed up, knocked on the door, and I told him that I was going to write for the paper. In my mind, though, I'm expecting that I'm going to have to come with a portfolio and show him some examples of my writing. I didn't have any, so that wasn't going to happen. And instead, I heard a response of, yeah, I'll give you 650 words. Let's see what you can do. You have to do it now. I had no choice, so I started writing, and I let him know I wanted to get into music writing. That's always been a passion of mine. So I got a shot at it, and I wrote a little bit about music and comedy. Got a chance to talk with a lot of my heroes and go and meet them down at their shows. That was my dream growing up. So to find out that it was that easy to get my dream, I just had to do it. It means I can do anything else too. So that was a huge part of it, but a number of different things went with that. So being someone coming from where I was, I had such bad social anxiety that I had trouble, going out in public. My fists are clenched. I can't make eye contact. To go and start doing interviews with people that I had, thought of as deities. I started out, it was so difficult to do an interview. I couldn't do follow-up questions. I was not really hearing what they said. I had to go back to the transcription. I wrote quite well still in the end. But I developed my ability to speak, to listen, to communicate with others. It has been just as big a part as anything else in building my career, as well as, all of the fun that goes with that, going out to see the concerts. It's just been, life-changing. Can't put enough praise on Nexus newspaper for giving me the opportunity.
So the skills that you developed doing some of your passions and your hobbies, writing, interviewing, went a long way in helping develop you as a program coordinator, or as a coordinator at Solid Outreach. That's really amazing.
Absolutely.
How important have these outside hobbies and passions? How important are they to you on a personal level, as someone on the front lines of homelessness and addiction, doing this very emotionally taxing work? Like how big of a role do they play in your life?
Well, I would think that it's been around my whole life. It never wasn't there. My father's a musician. He writes professionally on the side. My mom was a politician and advised people on speaking points, and basically she was a spin doctor, so she was involved in speech writing and that kind of thing. So I grew up with that as dinner conversation. But I also grew up at the Vancouver Folk Festival, so I spent my youth at outdoor festivals, and I started to hang out with musicians. That was how I developed my love for booze and partying. Goes from jamming to, you're still doing it at 5 a.m. when it's time to go to work. So it's always been there. What I found, though, is I love it just as much without the booze. So it keeps me sane to a degree. At the end of the day, in this line of work, when you leave at the end of the day, oftentimes people are still thinking about it, and that's why there's so much turnover. There's just a ridiculously high level of burnout. The work itself is not, taxing or physically involved. To be someone who's a roofer, who says this is much harder to work. Now I sit in a chair and talk on the phone, and I'm way more tired than I was at any point in time before. But yeah, the writing and being able to go to concerts. I love comedy as well. Hockey is another one of my favorite things to do. It helps me to shut off the constant chatter within my head. Not only that, but it gives me something at the end. When I write about it, it gives me something to be proud of. There's some closure. And I pair that with my love for music.
You spend your days on the front lines of very difficult, very emotionally taxing work. And now we're all going through the pandemic. We're going on 2+ years, I guess. From your personal history, from your experience, from what you work through on a daily basis, what type of advice could you offer to somebody who's watching or listening right now, who might be dealing with mental health issues or just an inability to even just stay positive on a daily basis? There's just a lot going on. Is there anything advice-wise or helpful tips that you could offer?
Everyone's going to be a little bit different. You take what you need and you leave the rest. Some people, the answer is going to be going to see a counselor or speaking with a professional. For me personally, I didn't trust the healthcare system, which is funny because now I'm employed full-time within it. But I found the answers with a group of strangers. So for me, I was on my own in a different city, no idea what to do next, at the mercy of the government, essentially. And I found a group of people, 12-step groups or various avenues of recovery, who are at different points in their life. Not all of them have followed the path that I followed, but most of them were there before I got there. So having somebody who's already done it, or someone who's going through the same struggle as we're currently going through, it somehow helps me to compartmentalize problems. I can solve any problem as long as they're coming one by one. It's when I have so many that I can't look at any one individual thing that it becomes overwhelming. And that isn't reality, but that's the reality that I experience. So for me, it was peer support, talking with people, and it took a while to get to a point where I could talk. It wasn't just, a counselor asked me what's going on in my life, and I told him, and everything's good. I had to develop trust in people. I had lost all trust in individuals as well as society, the system. Getting out and talking to people, and I found out that there are good people in the world. There is possibility of turning it around. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's my story.
Well, thank you so much, Fred, for coming to chat today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Joseph. Yeah.
If you want to learn more about Solid Outreach, visit www.solidvictoria.org or go pop in 1056 North Park in Victoria, B.C. We're going to play some additional footage from yesterday's Moms Stop the Harm rally at Legislature. Thanks so much for watching. This has been episode 3 of season 2, Surkeus Records, the podcast. We'll see you next time.
From Vancouver, and your presence is so valued as we make a statement about the tragic results of the coroner's report released yesterday. Thank you.
We gotta stop this. We need the government to hear us today. So this much I have to say, and I want to thank each and every one of the family members who have been inflicted with this drug death. It's not fair. We all got to stand strong and keep strong for each other. So this much I have to say. Hi, see ya.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you to Levana and William for that beautiful song and those very welcoming words. and I am honored to be joining you today on the traditional territories of the Lekwungen people, who have been wise stewards of these beautiful lands for so many generations. Yesterday, I focused my remarks on the people of the province and our governments and our decision makers, and I shared the facts of the death, and you all know the very terrible, tragic news that 2,224 people died last year as a result of drug toxicity, and that is a year after the previous year, which was the worst year ever, and the year after that, which was the worst year ever. And this is a drug crisis that's been hurting our communities for 8 years now. The public health emergency is in its 7th year. But today I want to direct my remarks to you because you are the warriors and you are heroes. I know that many of you have experienced the loss of a child or the loss of a family member, and you have experienced grief and pain that would bring most of us to our knees, and it probably has for you. But you are heroes. You have taken that pain and created something of immense value. You have created a group of caring, compassionate people doing their very best to prevent others from having to endure the loss that you have experienced. You have shared the stories of your loved ones and the images of your beautiful family members, and you have provided a very human face to a subject that has for so many years been hidden and ignored. You are heroes. You bring wisdom and compassion and experience and a tremendous generosity of spirit to the subject of drug use. And your courage is making a space for other families to talk about their own loved ones and their own losses. Thank you for your work in allowing us to have these conversations. Thank you for the support you provide each other. And thank you for helping our province and our country understand that people who use drugs are people like everybody else. They are good people. They have potential, and they are loved. And they need a kind and compassionate helping hand instead of the barriers that have been in place for too many decades. You are heroes, and I thank you.
I'm now going to invite Leslie McBain back to the podium to share a few words. Thank you.
Well, here we are again, and again, and again, and again. I'm optimistic, but I am not that optimistic that we won't be here again. Wouldn't it be nice if we could just come here and have tea and sing and, you know, dance on the lawn? Will we ever be able to do that? Yes, I think we will. I think we will, but we got to fight for it. Fight for that right. We, the moms and friends, have reached pretty much the limit of our patience. We have been pretty respectful, although I have some very disrespectful t-shirts I'd love to have worn today, but I knew that some of the media would be here and then maybe it would be the best idea.
It's true though.
It's true though. Don't mess with the moms is a nice one. Is a nice way to say it. Don't mess with the moms. I hate the concept of lying, especially by those who make policy. We have lies on the one hand, and we have silence on the other. Where the hell is Adrian Dix? Where is that person? That person who is charged with keeping the citizens of British Columbia alive and well and healthy. He has let 2,224 people die in 1 year to a preventable cause. I don't call that supporting citizens in healthcare. It, in fact, chokes me up. And hey, we are not a trucker convoy. We are here on our feet, holding our hearts in our hands, holding the memories of our dead children in our hands, and we are demanding safe supply. Demanding safe supply. Real, actual safe supply. In the many pathways that it can be implemented. They know, and you know who I mean by they know how to do this. It's not simple, but it is not impossible. It is eminently possible. We must fight. We must burn down the gates of the castle, the tower where Dix, Malcolmson, and Horgan live and dither. The same message is write to and connect with your MPs. We have some amazing MPs who are turning the corner, turning the tide. They are with us. They understand this dilemma, this horrible devastation that crosses our country. We have MLAs who also get it and speak out about it and speak out in here, in this building about it. So support those folks. Support them. This is our way. This is how our democracy is supposed to work. And if it doesn't work properly, then we strategize on how to make it work some other way. Okay, and I'm not going to say what that looks like. I'm not sure what that looks like, but we are getting more radical, and we'll be at their doors. Thanks everyone for being here. Thank you for your support and for your love and for wanting change. I can't tell you how I feel looking around here. Anyway, I could go on, but I'm getting all choked up here. So thank you, and I'll hand it back to Jenny, wherever Jenny is.